For some reason, I was elected to be that much of a voice in Sacramento. Really didn't amount to a whole lot. Just asked me a bunch of questions on why I chose to be in the Air Force. Well, it didn't work out exactly the way I planned.
A lot of things in life don't tend to work out the way we planned.
That is for certain.
It looks like we are live. We're recording now. And we're live on my Facebook page, so you know. I told my family. I think Ashley's the only one that's seen it so far, though. So we'll see if anybody logs in and listens in as we discuss.
Will it show you that on your display there?
Yeah, I can see us live there.
I see.
Oh, we'll turn that down, and we'll see if anybody comes on and comments. Anyway, so as way of introduction, I have the original William Waits here with me, coming live from the Silent Majority Foundation office, live on my personal Facebook profile. Had the opportunity because Grandpa was in town, and I thought that I'd bring him in and do a podcast recording for posterity. And it sounds like he had an opportunity today to talk to my cousin Seth, and he's already gone down the memory lane, but I'm going to ask him to do it one more time. And I kind of want to start there with you, Grandpa. I've always wondered, well, first of all, what year were you born?
1936.
1936. Okay, so what's your first childhood memory? What do you remember back to?
Oh boy, I can remember at least back to when I was 2 years old.
Okay.
And the only reason I happen to remember that is some of the older folks who might be watching your cast here would remember that it really didn't matter whether you're a boy or girl. Babies or very young children wore dresses.
Oh, okay.
And I remember two things about my early childhood. I was a little bit older. I was intensely sick. I had a disease they called pleurisy. It's a form of pneumonia, I think, but very serious. And I was sick enough that the doctor told my mom, well, if he makes it through the night, he'll make it. Otherwise, he won't be here tomorrow morning. So that's one of the possibilities of you being of a different lineage.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked out, obviously. The other thing was when I was about 2 years old, and then my older sister told me that you couldn't have been more than two then. We wore a dress, or I had a dress, and as I said earlier. In those days, it was common.
Mm-hmm.
Small children just wore a dress. Now, why do I remember? It was light yellow and had a little blue duck right there.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that was the instrumental part of me remembering it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how far I can remember.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you say dress, was it like a kind of like
a baby dress?
Like a baby dress,
Yeah.
like frilly, or did it just kind of straight?
It's just plain.
Kind of like a gown.
Yeah, more
Okay.
like a gown.
Like a gown. Okay.
Better description.
Gotcha. And so you remember that? Do you remember maybe probably as you got older? Do you remember what was going on in the world during those years?
Not a whole lot, of the specific incidences, and I'm a very poor historian. I remember that the world political situation was in a pretty much of an uproar, and then of course the war wasn't far away, and it only been about 20 years out of the previous World War, and we were almost into World War II. which did affect a bunch of people that I knew, and some of the older folks or the grown folks that were drafted or for one means or another went in the military, and far too many of them never came back. Just previous to this, I was right around 2 years old when it happened. There were 6 of us, 3 girls, 3 boys, and I was right in the middle of the pack. And the youngest was a girl. She was 2 weeks old, and I know that from my mother told me in later years when my father decided for whatever reason to split the sheets and go his own way. 2-week-old baby woman with 6 children, born in 8 years. That time of our history was, to say the least, a very difficult situation. But she didn't give up. She, for several points of impetus, decided that we would stay together. However it turned out is however it would turn out. But came very close to him being committed to a type of an orphanage. You have to do a little bit of history to go back to knowing much about what they call reform schools or reformatories.
Mm-hmm.
We came very close to being placed in that environment. Matter of fact, I was telling Seth earlier today about that particular incident. However, I don't think it's possible for us to understand what a very difficult position my mother was in under those conditions. In those days, there was no such thing as we know today as welfare assistance. It just didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever you were stuck with, you were stuck with. And so apparently it had gotten to the point where she just could not see a way out, that she was going to have to do something, to ensure that we all 6 survived. And so that route would have been the reform school, was where as your growth progresses to where you can physically make some kind of an accomplishment, regardless of how small or how large it would be, you could, be in a position to work for something.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me that she literally had the pen in her hand when the 3 older ones came home from school, and they knew what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And when she had to tell them she had not yet signed the paper, then they, knowing what they did about it, pleaded with her not to do it. However, it turned out, stay together,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was a considerable piece of wisdom and love for kids in grade school. The 6 of us were born in 8 years, and I was in the middle, so the 3 older ones were 2 years. The oldest was only 6 years older than I was. And so I was 2. That meant the oldest one was probably in the 3rd grade at most, 4th grade.
So, and who was the oldest? Was that H.A.?
H.A., yeah. H.A. was named after our father. Hampton Archie Waits Jr. He's gone. They're all gone but me and Ted.
And Ted was the youngest, correct?
Next to youngest.
Next youngest.
Judy, the girl.
So Judy was a baby.
Yeah, she was 2 weeks old when all this set fire.
So you've told me a story when this all went down. You lived at your father's parents' property. Is that correct? Is that
Yes.
what it was?
Yes, his parents and several of his siblings were still at the home, although they were pretty much grown. There was only 2 years difference between my oldest brother and their youngest.
Oh, wow.
So he was an uncle,
Mm-hmm.
just 2 years older than us half a dozen kids.
Yeah.
Presented some problems, but that's childhood.
Yeah.
Regards whether it's your siblings or friends or acquaintances.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. You just have to learn to work it out, work through it.
Right.
But,
It's humbling hearing kind of your origin story, because especially in today's age, because right now the social conversation revolves around, we've got Gen Z coming into adulthood now. Millennials have been adults for the last 20-ish years.
yeah.
And the conversation is how difficult it is now to buy a house and start a family and live in the economy that we live in now. What's kind of your take on that versus, what, you going into your adulthood and having grown up through, that time in our history? How do you feel about, those kind of complaints or that conversation?
That's a rather encompassing question. I'll explain it as best I can. The legal system was entirely different then. For instance, there was no such thing as child labor laws.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could find a labor that paid money, it was okay. Now you can readily see how that could be an extremely dangerous situation or a very fortuitous situation.
Mm-hmm.
The area where we lived in South Carolina, and still is to quite a degree, but not to the degree when we were that young, an agricultural area. I know you've seen movies or heard stories about King Cotton.
Mm-hmm.
Cotton was the major crop in the South for I don't know how long. In order to understand that part of our life, you're going to have to do a little bit of research and study.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a need to or a desire to. A cotton boll is about this big around
Mm-hmm.
when it's green, and of course as it matures, it turns darker. And excuse me, I should have a button. And it actually splits in 6 or 8 pieces and blooms out and opens up, so that the cotton, as it grows to maturity and becomes cotton rather than a little messy mess, has room. And then when you go to pick it, it was all manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
And picture in your mind, if you can, how large a pile would it take of cotton, just the cotton, to make 10 pounds? It's a pretty good size.
Yeah.
I recall getting paid a penny a pound.
Wow.
So 10 pounds of cotton picked by hand, and those dried hulls poking and gouging sometimes grown people would just have bloody, really horribly messed up hands. But it was the times. You took what you could get and did the best you could.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a dime then was considered quite a lot of money.
Would 10 pounds take all day? So that'd be a day's wage?
Yeah, that would be a day's work for me at that age. And I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was very young.
Very young. So between 5 and 7, or?
Probably 6 or 7 in that area. Yeah, between 5 and 7 is a good figure.
Okay, and so you'd work. Now, is this when's the season for picking cotton? Is that late
Deep.
summer?
Deep summer, yeah.
Okay.
If you're ever back there in that part of the woods, there used to be a lot of woods. I don't know how much of that is left either. The population has exploded.
Mm-hmm.
But driving down the road, you know what you're looking at. Cotton grows about this tall.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't know better, it would be similar to looking at a field of potatoes growing, as we know potatoes here. They're not this tall, though. They're more like this tall.
About shin height, yeah.
But that color and that full. But as it matures, then it loses virtually all the leaves off the stalk,
mm-hmm.
and just leaves the cotton to be gathered. And it was sort of something to see where they would gather it, and it would literally be people, just herds of people going down through the rows.
Mm-hmm.
And as you had a bag, my bag was not nearly as large as an adult's, because I was just a wee tot.
Mm-hmm.
But they were long, just a strap hanging around your neck, on your shoulders, and the bag would maybe be 6-7 feet long, and this big around,
mm-hmm.
just large enough, you get your hand up, grab it, throw it. When it got too full, then you had to go in and dump it. They'd dump it on a big mat and weigh it. And that's how they kept track of how much you had earned.
So at 6 or 7, you're doing 10 pounds a day, where adults doing much more than that? Or
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was not very much, but it was a dime more than I had.
Right.
And, of course, I'd give it to Mom. I had no idea how to distribute the wealth in any given family. She did.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. We lived in that particular area, which was just literally across the yard, maybe 30, 40 yards maximum from my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And the shack we lived in belonged to them. You know what a slab is, lumber-wise?
Yeah.
The initial cut off of a tree,
Mm-hmm.
as they start squaring it up. Well, a slab is the first one or two of those cuts, and would still have bark on the outer edges.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that house was made of.
Wow.
And fortunately, winters in that part of the South were not very severe, because you could poke your finger between them from the inside.
Wow.
So it was pretty meager, quite meager. But again, you did what you could do. And she constantly taught us that we were not the worst off.
Mm-hmm.
There are other people that literally hurt for a mouthful of food. And so we learned early to be responsible and to take care of your own.
Mm-hmm.
However, as the war broke, I recall many, many families whose fathers deserted them and left them in that. Fortunately, eventually they had certain types of mills, manufacturing mills. In that part of the country, at least, we just call them cotton mills, because
Mm-hmm.
they took the raw cotton, cleaned it, and which is a seed in each wad, has to be removed, and then they spin it or do whatever the process is to turn it into thread and eventually to cloth. And my mother, with a 7th grade education, you can imagine what kind of jobs were available. But again, you do what you have to do. And however, she made the best biscuits you could imagine.
I bet.
2 dozen to a pan.
Wow.
I remember that, 4 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
and they would everyone be just identical to each other, all rolled and patted by her hand, put in that plate and that pan for the oven.
So in that shack, did you have was it a wood stove, wood oven? Is that what it was?
They were called trash burners. They were about this tall, made out of extremely thin metal, and the lower part of the front of it would open so you could clean the ashes out. Put wood in from the top to keep it going. And it was a 4-room house, a living room, as living rooms go, a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. So Mom and the girls took 1 bedroom. We 3 boys had the other. And I remember still sleeping in a crib.
Yeah.
Even at that age. And I won't go into those scrawny details, but wasn't too great.
Mm.
But we were together. That's what they.
So I'm just kind of setting the setting a little bit. So it was your mother, you 6 kids, and all grade school age, and had determined that between all of you were going to eke out a living together rather than, what the alternative was to just reform schools or
Orphanage.
Or orphanage. So how many years did you said 4 or 5 years in that situation? Is that how long?
Well, from that old shack, we moved to a similar home, but it was a little better. But it was across town. It was in a totally different community. But we were more like each other in those days. I mean, the wealthy and the not wealthy there's definitely a separation of identity and so forth. It was an unpainted house, but it was a wood frame, had a porch on the front, porch on the back, and that was where you generally visited,
Mm-hmm.
unless middle of winter, it got
Right.
a little bit too cold. You'd find it. But at the same time, you don't have a lot of visitors then. Everybody's busy making a living. And so we lived there until I was in the 6th grade. And then the people who owned it asked us to find another place because they was going to move his family in there. It was difficult times, but everybody had difficult times.
Do you remember? So what was the catalyst? What allowed you guys to move out of the shack to that house? Do you remember what was it? Did your mom get a better paying job or?
Yeah, war was on, and the local airport became Columbia Army Air Base.
Okay.
The B-25 aircraft were stationed there. That's the ship that Jimmy Doolittle's crew bombed Tokyo with. Of all things, she, with a 7th grade education, became an A&E, aircraft and engine mechanic. Just her smarts.
Mm-hmm.
And from there moved to machinist, steel machinist, lathe turning and manufacturing, repairing, what have you, parts for the aircraft. And I remember those airplanes distinctly from where we were living, and that particular house had a large field beside it, and they would come and make what probably was strafing runs.
Mm.
So I don't know. I just remember them coming from one side and swooping down low and then heading on off. And she worked there until the war ended. And during those years, we ate better than we ever had. Government job,
Mm-hmm.
can buy groceries. But didn't last. When it was over, the job was over.
Mm-hmm.
And she went back to working in another mill similar, but instead of clothing material, they made a very heavy material that they used to squeeze those cotton seeds, to squeeze all the oil out of them. So totally different kind of mill work. But $20 a week fed a family of 7 for a long time. Now, if you even conjure that thought today, how far does $20 go?
Well, so we're still on the gold standard at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So $20. I mean, the $20 gold coin probably wasn't quite the same at that point. But how much was $20 back then? What would you compare it to now?
You know, that's a good question. I'll have to look that up. I would guess probably 60 or 70, because that $20 a week paid our rent, bought our groceries. And we did have an electric light in that house.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what it cost. That figure just,
So was that the first house you had electricity?
yeah.
So you remember the difference that made?
Oh, yeah. Between a kerosene lamp and an electric. Yeah, it's buried there. Those kinds of things I'll never forget.
I bet.
But we got through it.
So she went back to mill work, cottonseed oil. At what age was that? Do you know how old she was at that point?
How old she was? Well, she was born in 1910. I was born in 36. That's a difference of 26. So if I was in the 5th grade, I would have been 10 or 11 years old. So somewhere in my early teens when that next move occurred.
So she would have been late 30s.
Yeah, at best.
Late 30s. And she passed away at 46, correct?
Yeah.
She didn't have much life left after that. So did she finish? So was that her last employment? Was she working in the mills until she passed, or what else did she do?
No, there was another job I remember as a seamstress where they made clothing. Because I remember telling she on that particular job, when we were talking about it, she made collars like this. And she was good. She was a good seamstress. She made a lot of our clothes, and what she didn't make, she mended a hand-me-down or what have you. I remember one incident. Our nearest neighbor was probably about 8 or 10 miles. Maybe you had to go up one road and down another, and between you there was a bunch of wooded area. And so if you were fortunate enough to have your child outgrow a piece of clothing, they would find someone who needed it. And in this particular case, we got elected. They had one boy. The family had one child, a boy, about my age, and Ted, the next one. And a pair of coveralls came that he had outgrown. And too big for Ted, too little for me. So she cut the pants part off and gave me a shirt. I got a shirt, and I was torqued because I wanted the coveralls.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want a shirt. So I did not make her life any easier. I learned from the hardship, and I learned the value of work and the value of wages earned. There was not many things of materiality that any of us had that wasn't a hand-me-down or used. My dad was one of 9 boys, and of course he's out of the picture by the time the 6th kid was born. So Christmas time was pretty thin. If you had a Christmas tree, you went out in the woods and found a cedar of some sort and chopped it down, brought it home, decorated it. While she was a machinist during the war, she was good enough, and maybe this is normal, I don't know how much skill it takes, but she'd be milling a piece of steel sufficiently that it would come off as a spiral, very similar to the spiral in a notebook, except it'd be a little bit wider. And she would bring those things home, and you could stretch them, and hang them on the leaves of the tree. That was our Christmas decorations.
Wow.
So today you wouldn't. Our kids, fortunately, did not have to go through that. None of us. If it, the farther down the pay scale you go, or are able to make or not make sufficient funds to support your family, you look for things that show up. It was common to pass a pair of clothes down through the family. And oftentimes it didn't matter whether it was a boy or girl. It was a piece of clothing that was still wearable, usable. I don't see much of that now. I'm sure we have people who are poor and even destitute and have children, but most of the time, if the welfare system doesn't kick in and give them a hand, what do? And it didn't exist in those days.
Right.
But I don't hold, I don't think what happened with us was an intolerable thing. It was what it was. And so you learn from it in so many things. I'm not particularly happy that it was that way, but it was that way. And so you go back to what Mom's teaching. She had to be mother and father, and she says, I'm a woman. I don't know how to be a father, but I can teach you what I know. And so we didn't run around, feeling sorry for ourselves or looking for pity or handout. A couple of his brothers, my father's brothers, did pay attention, and they were not happy with how he had lived his life. But those were occasional things. I remember him showing up, one especially, that we didn't see very often. He was a CPA, as it turned out, so he was making pretty good money, and a little bit of a politician, very respected man. And I recall them showing up with a large box of groceries. I mean, something that you'd find in a cargo yard or something. A large piece of something came in it. But that didn't happen very often. The other brother, they occasionally did the same, but he had a large family too. So, there was a limit to what they were able to do where money was involved. He wound up being a foreman on a construction company that built bridges across rivers. So, there was some pretty good brain power in that family. I'm not sure what my father did. He was some kind of an electronics type when he went in the Army, but there was no communication. I mean, just before he shipped, what they called in, ship, you leave the country.
I didn't realize he was in the Army.
Yeah.
Have you looked up his military record at all?
No.
Do you have any interest in it?
interested maybe, but not sufficient to go to. It took me many, many years to get over what he had done to my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't see where it was worth a whole lot. I know who he is. I know what he looked like as an adult. But prior to that, I have no idea what he would look like. He was called Red, so Mom said he had red hair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Angie has red hair. Your hair is of the reddish tint.
Mm-hmm.
Angie's kids, she's got 2 red-headed kids.
He's definitely left his genetic mark. That's for sure.
Yeah, he left that. And just before I was born, she said, "I want a Wild Bill." Says he got a Wild Bill, but I don't remember him as a little one. Only one time. Between their house and the shack where we lived, there was a well. It was our fresh water supply. And, throw the bucket down on a chain, fill it, pull it back up, put it in the bucket to take to the house, so forth. And on the top had double doors,
Mm-hmm.
open and close. And then the chain went down between them, so you could recover it when you needed to. Well, it was routine in that time to keep a dipper at the well, because that's the coolest water you were going to get. It was when you first pulled it up. And it didn't matter who came, the dipper was there. You could pull a pail of water and have a cool drink. Well, as a little child, 5, 6 years old, I decided I'd just climb up on that shelf where you set your bucket, to fill it. Take a drink.
Mm-hmm.
He happened to be there. And he grabbed me across my underside here and turned my butt up in the air, and he paddled it all the way to the house. That's the one incident I remember.
Wow.
Of a specific relationship between the two of us. But I didn't grow up, feeling any hostility to it. I mean, I'd probably done the same thing to mine if they'd done, because I could have easily fallen in that well, and that would have been the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really remember him. I've seen a picture of him with all of his siblings except one sister. 9 boys and 2 girls, and one sister. I knew her later. I knew them all, but not very well. Truth be known, we were sort of the black sheep of the herd.
Mm-hmm.
And so none of my father's family made any real attempt to want to know or to follow us, although we eventually wound up going to school in the same place. And as cousins, it was fine. There was nothing there that we were angry about or anything. It's just what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been back to South Carolina for some time, and I never knew them to visit any of the cousins. Several of them were quite responsible. One, the oldest boy of the 3rd son in that family, was an attorney, and he was blind from birth.
Mm-hmm.
Attended the University of South Carolina, became a very good lawyer, was mayor of the town for a while.
Wow.
So there was some talent there if you had the gumption to pursue it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what any of the rest of them were, because we just didn't know them. I wouldn't know them, should they walk through the door now. I wouldn't know who they are. And that's sort of a shame.
Mm-hmm.
You should know your relatives that are that close to you. You really should.
Yeah.
But it was a situation where I used the term black sheep. That pretty much describes the situation.
Do you think that was a function of them maybe being ashamed of what your father did, or
No,
was it more of just they didn't want to have that taint on them?
that was primarily Granny's doing.
Yeah.
She, for whatever reason, never accepted my mother. According to her, you broke up the family when you married him, which I still don't understand. He was not the oldest nor the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
He was not the first nor the last to marry. But that was her thing.
Was your mom from a different, maybe class or different social group, or could there have been any kind of prejudice there?
I don't think so. It was fairly common at that time for people not to have beyond a seventh grade education. It was just accepted mode of operation, if you will. You're big enough to work, go get a job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not everyone, of course. As I mentioned, one uncle was a CPA, and the one next to him, the son was blind, became an attorney, and his brother was the same age as my next oldest sister, and she was 2 years older than I am. So, the whole family was within the age group where we should have known each other,
Mm-hmm.
but we were different. Lived in different side of town, and it just wasn't. Is that yours?
Miss Lori.
She's probably wondering what we're up to.
Oh, she knows what we're up to, but she's worried that you haven't eaten anything since lunchtime. So.
Oh, hey, I look like I'm losing weight.
Well, we've got some snacks if you're feeling like you need something. I can get you something. Get you something to drink too.
That's fine. So, what can I help you with?
So, I mean, I've heard pieces of this story, as I've grown up, and I've either heard it from you or secondhand from my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I've always found it amazing, the stark contrast of how you were raised and brought up, and what was available to you, and the resources that you didn't have, to what I was born into. That's a matter of two generations, to have such a stark contrast there. Ethan says you look like a stud, Poppy.
Who said?
It's Ethan. So now you've got great grandkids that you can see they're now reaping the rewards of your hard work and the ethics that you were raised with, and the example that your mother gave to you. And so that's why I've always been curious to know exactly what makes you tick, and what throughout your life, what have been those milestones that set you on the path that you've taken.
I would say without a doubt the best mother that I could possibly have had. She refused to give up. She also refused to let us be trash. One of her often spoken phrases, "You are poor. You will never need to be dirty. Water is cheap." Aside from that, learning the lessons of dealing with hardship that should never have been. I mean, at the very least, if you're caught in that financial purgatory, if you will, there's nothing that says you have a right to desert. It just doesn't exist. So consequently, my two brothers and I have never discussed how we felt in these various situations coming to adulthood. We never discussed our situation. It was understood and accepted. It just was. But and I do not know about the two brothers, I made a decision that will never, ever be my family. Regardless of the cost, I will never desert. Now, the rest of the story is, even though we never discussed this, they did the same thing. H.A.'s gone. His wife is gone. H.A.'s my older brother. Ted is still here. He's 2 years younger, or a year younger than I am. He lives in Connecticut. Still has the first woman he married. And they are both living still. I haven't seen them in a few years. And I may not in this life. I don't know. It is much more difficult to travel now, even though the airplane is still there. They're in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
We're out here, of course, obviously.
Yeah.
For whatever the reasons, and I do not know, they never saw opportunity or fit to come our way. If we saw each other, Mary and I had to go that way.
Mm-hmm.
Which, as it turns out, is okay. They're all gone now. My Mary's been gone for 2 years. And I wonder often exactly what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't split, neither of us. And H.A. and Doris never split. Ted and his wife never split. And for that, I'm grateful. Now, how much longer I got? I don't know. I just turned 89.
Mm-hmm.
But there is some longevity in our family. I had a great-grandmother that lived to be 99. And I remember seeing her a time or two, but she was pretty much disabled by the time we got to know her. And some things Mom says she died of blood poisoning from a scratch in her toe.
Mm.
And she did die from blood poisoning, but I don't know how you scratch your toe.
Yeah.
Although I did cut one of mine the other day trying to trim my nails. And Bill wound up having to bandage it up because I couldn't get it to stop bleeding.
Thankfully, medical science has progressed as well.
Yeah. And I look at you kids, and you know what a cull is?
Mm-hmm.
I used this in a church and taught one day, and everybody just looked like, what'd he say? Says, well, I got so-and-so and so-and-so, and there ain't a cull among them. I expected a chuckle.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I know what a coal is because I'm raising chickens now, and occasionally there's a coal in them. Occasionally we gotta get rid of the bad one.
Yep.
I've actually got a few I gotta get rid of soon too, but don't tell my kids. They don't like that.
No, that's a tough thing. You think about it. How far back, for instance, do you remember?
I don't remember back to. I do remember being in the crib though. Yep. Actually, I think one of my first memories is it was either my Aunt Jackie or Aunt Annette, my mom's sisters.
Yeah.
I think they were up visiting, and they put me down for a nap, and I wasn't very happy about it, and they eventually came and got me out of the crib. I do remember that. It's probably one of my earliest memories. I believe that was the house on White Drive.
Okay, so you can remember You remember things. You remember flying through the driveway on your bicycle and
Oh,
going over the fence.
definitely remember that. Those are core memories.
Yeah.
Being good, we lived on the end of a street that was teed on a cul-de-sac, and driving, I could go all the way down that street, which was probably several hundred yards long.
Mm-hmm.
Could get as much speed as I possibly could, and we had the curbs that were, shaped as a ramp. They weren't the squared off curbs. And my goal was to eventually be able to clear the entire front yard. I don't know if I knew that, but I was trying to get as far as I can and clear the front yard. And luckily I never did, because I would have gone through that front window if I had.
Well, it's a wonder that we grew up as safely as we did, because youth is difficult, and we wonder about so many things. And so, not knowing, we often try things that we shouldn't be trying.
Mm-hmm.
And so accidents are going to occur.
For sure. So you made it through your elementary years. How old were you? So it was 26 years difference between your mom and you. So you were 20 when she passed. Is that about right?
56, yeah, 20.
So you were 20. So when did you enter the Air Force?
I went in straight out of high school when I was 18.
Okay. So you were in the Air Force when she passed.
Had just retired. Oh, no, my mother.
Your mother.
Yes, I was. I was in Sacramento, stationed in Sacramento.
So the one thing I haven't ever asked you is what was your reason or drive to join the Air Force? Was there a sense of patriotism, or was it a necessity? What were your thoughts when you did that?
I think I'm reasonably patriotic. I'll fight anybody that starts putting my country down. I don't care who you are. I'll fight you. So I suppose there's at least a certain degree of patriotism there. But I wanted to fly. I had no idea what I had to do to fly.
Mm-hmm.
So I just figured, well, I'll join the Air Force. Then I'll go be a pilot. But it's not that simple. Number one, by the time I got in the Air Force, you had to have a college degree to be an officer. And as far as I know, that's still, and justifiably so. I don't have an argument with it. But I just never saw how I could manage to get from scratch to gain a degree, because I was in the service already. And I think there were some programs that could have developed into that, but I didn't pursue them.
Was that pre-GI Bill, or is this around the same? When did the GI Bill? When was that introduced?
I don't have any idea when the GI Bill happened. It's not one of those things that, well, growing up the way I did makes you independent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was not gonna willingly accept anything that even looked like, because I seen too many grievous remarks about people. And the purest even example I can see of that is how initially women in the service and then women in combat were treated.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this stubborn streak, if you will, for lack of a better. And the bottom line is I just flat didn't do it. I could have, if I had just mustered the energy to go ahead and work, even if I never got to be a pilot. I should have done that. But you got to have some willpower. You got to have something helping you.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't. So.
What attracted you to being a pilot? Was it your mother working on the airplanes in the machine shop, seeing those B-52s, or what was it that got you dreaming about flying?
I'm not sure. I just, all my life I can remember, I want to be a pilot. And, thinking back on it, I don't know why I didn't, because I'm pretty persistent about things that I wanted. So obviously I didn't want it bad enough. because I totally believe anybody can become anything if they're willing to do the work. And so apparently I just wasn't willing to put that into it. Then we married and had children come along and so forth, and those become primary.
Mm-hmm. How long were you in the Air Force before you met Grandma and got married?
Well, we were married in 56, 57. Quiet.
She's watching.
Yeah, I believe it was November 57.
Dad was born in 62, so
Yeah.
5 years before you came along.
Yeah, that was another difficult period. She just didn't get pregnant, and that bothered her. She had a lot of crying sessions. She wanted children immediately. Didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but once he showed up, then we had kids in a hurry.
Right.
But life is a never-ending experience. I have a friend, you probably know him, but we won't go into that. He has a saying, it's sort of humorous, but it's also sort of true. He says, life is tough, and then you die.
I would say it's 100% true.
But I readily admit that too often we make it tougher than it has to be.
Well, and I think to your story, I think some of us have it tougher than others.
Oh, yeah. But again, a lot of it, in my case, I didn't ask to have it that way. But I do have the responsibility of making it as good as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But by the time you realize some of these things, you're well down the road, and some things have already passed you by. Maybe still attainable, but much more difficult. But all things considered, I have no complaints.
Mm-hmm.
When I left service after 24 years, my medical folder is not that thick. I never heard a bullet whiz past my ears. Those are all huge blessings.
For sure. Because the years that you were in the service, when did you start again? What was the first year?
I enlisted in October of 54.
And then retired in what year?
Technically, 01.
Technically, what?
Actually, I'd established with the leave time I had accrued and so forth, I would put in for my papers when I was eligible for retirement, and then added the leave time that I had accrued,
Mm-hmm.
added that to the date, and it came out something in December, and so I said, okay, December 31st. But when all the paperwork is done, it says 01.
Interesting.
I don't know why.
So that's your technically. So the years that you were active service though were from.
Yeah, from excuse me, from October of 54, just a couple of months after I graduated high school, until December 31st. Oh, goodness sakes, where did that date go? I'm ashamed. I'll have to go look at my DD 214.
That's okay. You don't have to have the exact date. What I'm going with that, I just want to know which wars were you serving in? You know, which wars did we engage in during that time?
We're right after the Korean War. My brother was in during, he was in the Navy, and he was on, of all things, a cargo ship, hauling ammunition
Mm-hmm.
during the Korean War. But it was pretty much all over before I went in. And then shortly thereafter, the mess in other parts of Southeast Asia came up. But I was never assigned over there. Some of my good friends were,
Mm-hmm.
and some didn't come back. But that's just part of the risk when you go. I mean, it was all voluntary. The draft was over. It was no longer law. So anybody in the military after that died was there because they volunteered.
Mm-hmm.
I don't regret one day of it. That it provided an opportunity for me to be places that I may never have been, and to meet people that I obviously would never have met just because I signed up.
So, my dad actually mentioned he got the date. It was 1/1/1979 is the date that he's got for your last date in active service.
79?
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
He graduated in 1980.
Yeah, 54. 54 and 20, 74, 24 more is 78.
So that'd be 25 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
25 years active service.
No, 24.
24.
Yeah, so I went in October, and I finished the 31st of December. So it would have had to go all the way around to October again to be 25.
Get 25.
But I didn't have a lot of foreign duty. Iceland and Newfoundland, mountaintop radar stations.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the breaks for being in that field. That's where the radar sites were. Those were unaccompanied tours.
So, the joke that I tell people when they ask me how I ended up in Moses Lake or my family ended up in Moses Lake, I tell them, well, my grandpa was in Newfoundland and Iceland, so when he got to Moses Lake, he said, well, this is better than where I've been.
Yeah.
Did that go into that decision making process? What ended up leaving you guys? Why did you come back to Moses Lake? Because you were in Moses Lake and then left and then came back.
It's all part, I think, Rob, of the growth process that we go through from birth till it's all over. We moved here in '68, and then while we were here, I was assigned to Iceland, and the family was here, and we got everything readjusted, moved, and what have you. And literally driving out of town, I said to Mary, I says, what do you think if we come back here to settle? And she says, okay. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did tour to Iceland, was reassigned to Illinois, and then reassigned from Illinois back to the same place in Iceland, the same unit.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, enough of this. So before I left up there, I started the paperwork and finished it up here. And they still made a mistake in it. I think I got it fixed though, but I'm not sure. And I don't know anything else of significance that it will mean anything. It was just a one-day difference in actual retirement date and what they put on that retirement discharge paper.
Mm-hmm.
And the only problem it caused is recently. That one day bit me. Didn't cost me except the headache and the nausea of having to correct it,
Mm-hmm.
which meant I had to go to Fairchild, go through a complete review there, and then get the information I needed, who all I had to notify to make that correction. But it's done. My medical service is still good. And unless something really bad happens in Congress, it'll be there until I'm gone.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it turns out to be, I've been very fortunate. Met some great people. Have a bunch of great grandkids.
So those people that you met, at some point during your career in the Air Force, you met some members of the Latter-day Saint faith.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's how it got me here.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that journey for you.
Okay, that all started when I was in Newfoundland. This was the year, and whoever's listening to this may not realize what 70s are, but there was a guy assigned to me from Virginia, and he was a 70, which that itself didn't have anything to do with it, but I was sort of had some time off because I messed around and was almost injured. But so I was just literally just laying around my room, and guys would stop, he'd see everything's all right. And we were talking, I've been a sucker for books all my life,
Mm-hmm.
And one discussion said something about books, and he says, "Oh, so why don't you just go up there? Old Elmore's got a whole box full of books." I said, "Oh, really?" Well, I had read everything I had with me, and it was a remote site, so we didn't have much of anything in an ongoing change of merchandise. PX had cigarettes, and blah blah blah. So that wasn't even smoking then, I don't think. Might have been. I don't know. That part doesn't matter. It terminated at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he had a box of books. Guess what they were?
Did he have a full box of Book of Mormon? Is that what he had? Just the Book of Mormon? Didn't have anything else in there?
That's it.
That's what he brought.
He just brought a case of Book of Mormon.
Well, that's how they get you. You read the book, and then you're hooked, right? That's the theory.
Well, I guess he had another book, Their Own Families, and I can't remember how it was titled, but it was really well put together, and I was impressed with that. And of course, to know where that led. Anyhow, we started talking about various scriptures, and of course, you get to the point, once you know, all I know, he's LDS now. He's a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so there's where the conversation's going. Well, how did you get it? So forth. And then it's history. I did not join at that time, but I certainly was not objectionable to entertaining the thought. And that was a 1 year, what we call a remote tour, no family,
Mm-hmm.
on a mountaintop up in Newfoundland. But I could use the tack lines at night when, very little activity was going on. You could be bumped any time with a real tactical call. But I could call Mary. She was in California living with her aunt. And so I told her then, I says, "Hey, I met a guy up here. He's a Mormon." And she got a little bit concerned.
I'm sure she did.
And so somebody had told her. all about the Mormons. They've never even opened the book, but they know all about them. Anyhow, it's just a progression. From there, I was assigned to Sweetwater, Texas. And my boss was the branch president. Little piece of rope. You just keep feeding the rope.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we joined. And she didn't at first, but she did not put up any kind of argument or anything about entertaining the missionaries. And wound up being baptized in West Texas. What the heck's the name of that town? Gosh, my memory.
Was it Sweetwater, Texas?
Well, I was stationed at Sweetwater, but the town east of there, because we were just meeting in a house, and had a branch or a ward in Abilene, and so that's where converts went to for nearest font.
Mm-hmm.
It's been interesting. We had, while we were still living there in Sweetwater, some women, I guess they were missionaries from whatever church they came from, knocked on the door one day, and Mary answered the door. I was at work, and they wanted to know what we were. She says, well, we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he says, who's that? And she said, well, you probably know them as Mormons. Oh, the Mormons. We know all about them. She didn't even know the name. So she said, in effect, I don't think we have anything more to talk about. No sense in continuing that under that stress level.
Right.
But I've never looked back, Rob. I got my answer and didn't even know I was looking for it. And it's just been growth after growth after growth.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly do not know, now that I know, how people get through those stressful situations, losing a child. I hesitate to think what it would, Lori and Andrew would have been if we were not members of the church and understood. She's not dead. She's just down the hall. And that's the way it all works out. I don't know all the answers, don't expect to for some time. But I know enough that I hope I never screw up enough to be tossed. It's happened to better men.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss her. But I can't have her back right now.
Mm. Well, you've got her. She's just not by your side right now.
Yeah. It'll work out. Always does.
So I'm in the thick of raising 6 daughters. And I know I heavily rely on my upbringing, the example of my father, the example that you set. And I know that a lot of the principles and standards that we're taught come from the church and come from growing up within the gospel. Do you think that the way that you raised your kids, how much of that was shaped by your own early childhood and your mother's example, and how much of that was shaped by bringing them up in the church?
Some and all. In that investigative period, it was painful because I had already learned how much family-oriented is the gospel. That was one thing. The fact that I grew up in a broken home was very important. And the branch president just lived right several houses down from us. And we spent a few minutes in the backyard on that hot Texas climate. And I just said, President, I cannot even allow the possibility of breaking my family. If that's the price, then I'm not. Can't do that. I just don't have that much faith. And we chatted some more, and then we visited some more. And one day he was just leaving our house. And I don't remember exactly how we got to this particular point. But I was told, I says, if it's a question of losing my family, then the answer is no. I can't do that. I've been through that already. And he said something about, give it 6 weeks. And I says, okay. And in that 6 weeks, I made the decision to be baptized. And in it, he says, I will assure you that within 6 weeks, Mary will come with you. In 3 weeks, Mary says, get the missionaries back, please. I said, we just cut this thing in half. But I'm reasonably sure that Mary had, because she sat in on the discussions as well. So I'm pretty sure that she had almost made the decision. She just needed that one little assurance. But Rob, I remember distinctly looking through, and at this time they had those little, I don't know if you ever seen them or whether they used them when you were on a mission, little
Booklets or lessons?
No, they weren't booklets. They were one sheet things, and yeah, in a sense, because it just depended on what they were teaching you that night as to which one they handed you. I distinctly remember sitting on that couch in the living room, and I knew right then, because this boy in Iceland he'd already taught me all that stuff, the whole thing, and I just didn't recognize it. But back here with 2 elders sitting there teaching us, and I don't today even remember where it was, but there was a verse in the Book of Mormon. And my mind said, ding! And that was it. And I've regretted not having the, I don't know what the right quality is. I'm not making a note of that so I could tell someone else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it just, any question, any doubt, or whatever. When I read that, I knew, well, this is it. And you know, up until Bud challenged me to have the missionaries, he had retired, and a young officer from ROTC at BYU had been assigned to the crew. He's gone now too.
Mm-hmm.
But they put him on our crew. He was a controller. And we just became thicker than thieves, and he would just sort of snicker, you know. he has nothing to do when you're working night shifts. He's just there in case you have to get control, intercept with the fighter crew. So he just spending all of his shift just studying something else. And bids are terrible. In that situation, there's almost nothing happening. You're just sitting there, somebody's watching the scope. And if a blip shows up, you put it on the board, and the ID tech says, okay, that's so-and-so and so-and-so. So you're back to normal, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where he was. So in the interims in there, I would say, hey, I was looking at something the other day. Can you tell me so-and-so? And he says, well, yeah. And it'll just, matter of fact, give me the answer. And eventually, this has to come to a head. He says, Willie Waits, you're never going to make up your mind unless you have the missionaries. Why don't you just have the missionaries in, and they can explain it all to you. I'll answer your questions, but you're not going to change until you take that step. And he was right. One of them is from Snohomish, and he came to visit us since when we first were living out on the base. Haven't seen him again since.
Wow.
The other one was one of Brother Brigham's brothers,
Oh, yeah?
descendant.
Right.
His name was Young also. Haven't seen him but once since that. We were stationed in Texas. We'd been in a year. Kim was the branch president, going through all the temple prep, which he taught.
Mm-hmm.
He is really bright. And so he says, you can go to whichever temple you want. I said, well, let's go to Salt Lake. Let's go to the big one. Well, Elder Young lived in Monticello. Well, from Sweetwater, you go right through Monticello. So his family had some sort of machining business. I don't know whether it was automotive or what it was, but it had to do with mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was easy to see. Well, say Young, so blah, 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 right there as we went by. And so I went in, and this part was true. There was a time you go through Utah, you're not accepted right away. And I went in and asked if you know Brent Young. And the guys just looked at me stone-faced. Said, oh, yeah, I know Brent Young. What do you need him for? And I said, well, he taught us about the church. He said, oh, well, they're down at the lake. I'll tell him you were here.
Open up right away, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it was twing. But you know what? We drove through Salt Lake area on leave, headed back east. And I developed a little oil leak under the valve cover on the car engine.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to find somebody, that could fix it. And I figured it was probably just a gasket crack, or failure. And I found one. But they weren't Mormons. Had an interesting conversation there, too.
I bet.
He said, oh, yeah, them blank Mormons, I said, well, it wasn't too bad. He only charged me $2.50 for a nut to go on that shock absorber that was loose. Yeah, so there has traditionally been, and I imagine there still is a certain amount amongst some people. Not anything like it was then even,
Mm-hmm.
but it's people. Those are all things that we're part of what we're here for is to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad I got it done, at least that far. Now, if I can keep my nose clean a little bit longer, maybe she'll have me.
Well, you got to endure the end, Grandpa. You got a long ways to go there.
So what else would you need to cover? Or
Well, Lori told me that you're probably going to be back here again next week, and if you're okay with visiting with me again next week, we could probably stop there and pick up here
Sure.
again. It's getting a little late. I know people probably are getting a little tired of listening to us jabber. So we'll make a series of this, but I think that's a good place to stop.
or is this on the
What's
book? Is this on the Facebook now?
Yeah, it's live right now, and
Oh, goodness.
they'll be recording, so you can listen back to it if you want to.
Oh, good.
And I'll share it with the family if they want to have it as well. But yeah, I'd like to make a little series of this because I'd like to dive in a little bit more. You know, raising my aunts and uncles, and growing up in Moses Lake in the 80s and 90s, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And I'd like to pick your brain a little bit more about your patriotism, because the path that I've chosen and walked is largely because of the example that you've set, and I'd like to kind of, I see we're going into a pattern that is not unlike World War II in the world, and with the obvious the stark difference in the abundance that we live in now versus what you grew up in the United States, but we still have a lot of the social angst and cultural parity that we're going through. So I'd like to talk about that, and maybe talk about what's similar to then and now, and where we're headed, and just kind of pick your brain, because I think that the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that you have to bring to our current situation is something that we should tap into before it's too late, before we don't have the access to that. So as long as you're willing to come talk to me next week,
sure.
we can probably cut it off there, and we'll thank everybody for listening in. We've had a pretty steady audience, I've noticed. Angie was making some comments. We'll have to talk more about Angie next time. We'll bring her up. So thanks for your time. Thanks for listening in. And hopefully we'll have a section 2 next week.
Good. Glad to be of service.
All right, we'll talk to y'all later.
Okay.